Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
There is an empty Senate seat in Michigan's Thumb region. No one currently represents the district because Governor Gretchen Whitmer has not yet called a special election.
And some are saying she's playing politics with it.
We know this is a competitive seat. The Republicans can win, and the governor, for purely political reasons, is trying to prevent us from having representation in this district.
We will get an update on Michigan's 35th state Senate district later in the show. But first,
if I've done one thing, it's I've gotten people to work together instead of fighting with each other.
Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan delivered his final State of the City address last night.
It comes as Duggan, a Democrat, prepares to step down as mayor and run for governor as an independent.
You spoke to the mayor earlier this morning, Zoe.
I did, and I started by just asking him what he wanted to get out of his final address.
I just wanted a chance to thank everybody who has had such an important role in Detroit's recovery over the last 12 years. And I think people didn't realize how many business people in Michigan from across the country, how many clergy, how many block club presidents, how many employees who have all played a role, worked together. And it was a night to celebrate what they'd all done.
Mayor, we have talked about this for years when you've delivered speeches, this need for highlighting the growth and development within the city center versus attention and resources being paid to neighborhoods and the Detroiters who have lived in this city for generations and generations, who just say not enough attention is being paid to communities and to neighborhoods.
Well, the 600 block club leaders would strongly disagree with what you just said. The way the neighborhoods have come back in the city is amazing. We got 12,000 vacant houses that have been fixed up and occupied. The University of Michigan just did a study that homeowners in the neighborhoods of the city grew $4.6 billion in wealth in the last 10 years. So that's a narrative that basically comes from outside the city. It doesn't come from the neighborhood leaders who have done so much block by block to bring our neighborhoods back.
You had a moment in your speech where you talked about what politics and relationships used to be like in the city, that it seemed that whoever blamed someone the most, that was the winning strategy. You've wanted to change that. What's your message to city leaders, many who were in the audience last night, about after you leave, about working together into the future?
Well, we're seeing it already. The candidates who are running for mayor, every one of them is running on a platform of unity and building on the progress and everybody being valued and included. There is no us versus them rhetoric from them and for most of the city council candidates. And I think it wasn't just my first election in 2013. In 2017 and 2021, everybody who tried to run for mayor or council playing that old us versus them campaign got clobbered. And so I think we have fundamentally changed politics in the city. The average Detroiter loves the fact we celebrate all of our partnerships and relationships. And I'm just really pleased by watching the campaign for my successor.
Let's talk about working together. You, of course, are running for governor. You are running for governor as an independent. And you did have a lot of shout outs last night in your speech. I found it interesting that you, name check, didn't have this on my bingo card for your speech. Republican Speaker of the House, Matt Hall. What do you make of this relationship with Matt Hall going forward?
Yeah, well, I had a great relationship with Tom Leonard. I had a great relationship with Chatfield when he was there, a great relationship with Jason Wentworth. The nice thing about being a mayor is you run nonpartisan. And most mayors of big cities in this country build relationships with both Republicans and Democrats in their state house. That's what you have to do to get things done. But I'm very pleased that on this public safety trust, this is an embarrassment. The state of Michigan appropriated $75 million for cities to put police and violence prevention on the street, from Grand Rapids to Lansing to Pontiac to Flint. And then they never pass the implementing legislation to release the money. So that $75 million is sitting in a bank account 6 months later. And since Matt Hall has come in as speaker, he has said, I am going to help get this money released and get the public safety money into the cities of Michigan. And so Matt Hall and I are going to disagree on things, but we're also going to find common ground, and we do have a good relationship.
Mayor, what is going to happen to the Renaissance Center?
That remains to be seen. Again, this is something that we're going to need Lansing's help on transformational brownfield issue. As I mentioned yesterday, aligned with Macomb County that's trying to redo the closed Lakeside Mall with a major housing complex. But I think Dan Gilbert's vision of 3 towers, a hotel tower, an office tower, and a residential tower, along with a spectacular rebuild of that waterfront with a Navy Pier-like development for families in this city, I think is a vision that the great majority of people buy. And we're just going to have to work through. I think city council is ready to support it. We're going to need some help from the state legislature.
Well, that's my question. Matt Hall, who we were just speaking about, Republican speaker, has said he's not interested in using state dollars for the Renaissance Center.
And I agree with him. And our proposal is not state dollars. The beauty of the transformational brownfield, you don't write a developer any check. You give them a discount on the new taxes that they create out of basically vacant land and empty buildings. And so this is a very different proposal than Speaker Hall reacted to before. I actually agreed with the speaker's objections to the earlier ideas, and hopefully we will be able to convince the leadership in the legislature that raising the brownfield cap, which is how all of that development is getting done in Grand Rapids. It's just a visionary rebuild of the riverfront in Grand Rapids. The way the high-rise development is getting done in Lansing is the same principle, and we would like to do it at the Renaissance Center as well.
Mayor, what are you worried most about the city after you leave?
I really just feel great. I think 5 years from now, the city is going to be a much better place than it is today. Now, there are things happening at the federal level that you can't control. I think the most important thing would be if President Trump and the leadership in Canada can reach an agreement on tariffs that's final and predictable. I think that would help the economy of Michigan and the economy of Canada both. And hopefully they will work that out. But that's probably at this point the biggest risk for Michigan.
What conversations have you had with the Trump administration vis-a-vis the relationship between Detroit and Windsor, between Michigan and Canada?
Yeah, we have conversations with individual departments on individual programs, but they aren't calling to ask my advice on international negotiations.
The last time you and I spoke, we talked about Joe Biden. You were very close to the former president.
Yeah.
What has it been like having a President Trump in the White House for the city of Detroit over the past months?
Well, I mean, of course, I lived with President Trump in the White House for 4 years already, so this is nothing new for us. And we had a perfectly good relationship during his first term. We had HUD Secretary Ben Carson, who supported Detroit, and of course was from the city. The Chief of Staff, John Kelly, was very supportive in the first administration. We found individual folks who were interested in Detroit that we could work with, and I'm hoping to develop those relationships with individual cabinet officers going forward.
Mayor, before we let you go, I am curious. You're running for governor as an independent, but right now there is still a D by your name. I'm curious about what you see fellow Democrats and the kind of conversation or inter-party fighting that's happening about whether some Democrats want to take a more pragmatic approach, right? The sort of realpolitik of trying to work with the current president versus those who are saying, no, we want to fight like hell and we are going to put up every single roadblock that we possibly can. You have an astute political mind. What is your thinking about this?
Yeah, let's be clear. There is no D by my name. I'm a nonpartisan mayor who's running as an independent. And so it isn't my place to give advice to the Democratic Party, but you've seen what's going on. The national polls show that 29% of Americans have a positive feeling about the party. And it's basically defined itself as not standing for much except attacking Republicans. And you're starting to see the problem. When you don't actually stand for anything, you have a hard time figuring out what your message is. And the Republicans on their side aren't a lot better. They basically define themselves as, saying Democrats are not real Americans and don't have your interests at heart. But I really don't care about what the Republicans or the Democrats say. This city came back because we pulled everybody together without hating anybody, without attacking anybody. And I think we could do the same thing at the state.
Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan delivering his final State of the City address last night. Mayor, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks for having me, Zoe.
The Michigan House, it's Republican-controlled. The governor's office, Whitmer, is a Democrat. But in the state Senate right now, it's complicated. Democrats control the chamber, but only by one vote. And there is currently an open Senate seat.
It's been vacant ever since then Democratic State Senator Kristen McDonald-Rivet resigned from the state Senate after winning a congressional seat last November.
And this open Senate seat is in a swing district. That means if it goes Republican, the state Senate would be tied.
Now, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist would get the tie-breaking vote, but as you said, Zoe, it makes things complicated.
Complicating things even more is the fact that Governor Gretchen Whitmer has not called for a special election yet to fill the seat. A.J. Jones is a reporter at WCMU, and he has been covering the open 35th. Hey, A.J.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to talking about this.
So, A.J., what's going on here?
Well, here in the state of Michigan, the governor has basically the power to declare when the special election is. The state constitution says the governor, quote, may declare a special election. But 2 months since McDonald-Rivet resigned her seat, we don't know when those dates will be.
And this matters, right? Because as we said, it is an open seat in a somewhat swing district. So if this seat goes Republican, then the Senate would be tied. Now, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist would be able to be a tie-breaking vote, but it makes things very tight for Democrats.
Absolutely. And this is such an important seat because, as we know, Whitmer is term limited next year. The Republicans currently hold a majority in the state house. So losing this seat would be really another roadblock to Whitmer getting her agenda across the line. And as you've seen already from the early session, things are pretty tight and every vote really does matter. The district itself is a real swing district. So it's kind of hard to tell where this is going to go because, as you mentioned, McDonald-Rivet is now the House representative representing the area, but President Donald Trump beat Vice President Kamala Harris in the same district in the November elections. So it's a real purple district.
AJ, you spoke with Republican Senate Minority Leader Eric Nesbitt. What did he have to say?
He told me that the Republicans can win, and the governor, for purely political reasons, is trying to prevent us from having representation in this district. That's a direct quote. He mentioned that the seat's been open for 2 months, but we've known about this for 4 months because, as you mentioned, McDonald-Rivet won her seat back in November. Nesbitt, as you know, is a gubernatorial candidate. In addition to being the Senate Minority Leader, he has been pretty vocal, and as many state Republicans have made public statements calling for an election to be declared.
AJ, what are you hearing from people in that district who, well, don't have representation in the Senate right now?
There was a protest at the State of the State address in front of the state capitol in the hours before the speech. A lot of big-ticket Republicans spoke, and I spoke to quite a few people from the area at that event, and they all told me that they felt that it wasn't really fair, they felt unrepresented, they had signs that said special election now, people were chanting call to vote. The chambers of commerce in the Tri-Cities, so that's Bay City, Midland, and Saginaw, about 270,000 people live here. It's one of the state's larger metro areas. They put out statements calling for a special election because back last month there was a big debate about sick leave and minimum wage, and the business leaders wanted someone in the community in the state Senate to represent their interests. I had a conversation with Tony Stamas, the head of the Midland Chamber of Commerce, and that's kind of what he told me. This is a very important moment for business leaders and employees, and we'd like to have someone representing us. Interestingly, I had a conversation yesterday with the mayor of Bay City, Christopher Gerard. He recently vetoed a resolution that would have declared Bay City a welcoming community and limited the extent that local cops and city officials can collaborate with federal immigration authorities. Gerard vetoed that resolution because he was worried about potentially losing state funding because the GOP-led House passed a resolution that would ban earmarks for any communities that limit cooperation between local officials and federal immigration officials. And Gerard told me that that would be especially problematic for Bay City because Bay City doesn't have a state senator. So if the state house says, okay, you're not getting any earmarks, there's no one on the state Senate side to advocate for the community. So a lot of people are calling for some clarity around when this election is going to be.
Most of the constituencies that you just talked about there, including Tony Stamas, who's a former Republican state legislator, are you hearing anything from Democrats, progressives in the district about how they feel about the state of things?
So Dylan Wegala, he is the state representative in District 26. He posted on Twitter, agreed with a user that there should be an election called to fill the seat. 26th district is Garden City.
And Wegala is a hardcore progressive who has been willing to take some shots at the administration if he thinks that they're not living up to progressive ideals.
And what have we heard from the person at the center of all of this, Governor Gretchen Whitmer?
I asked Governor Gretchen Whitmer a question at the Northern Michigan Policy Conference. This was back on January the 31st. And what Whitmer told me is that there are set election dates in the political calendar that essentially you have to center the elections around. And Whitmer told me that she was working with her legal team to sort of work out all of the kinks, and that we would get more insight in the coming weeks. Now, granted, she did say this back in January, but that's what she told me. Her legal team was looking at it, and they'd be making recommendations to her in the coming weeks.
Okay, so weeks came and they went. And then just last week, Rick, you asked the governor for an update. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
Rivet Senate seat.
I'll let you know when I got something to announce.
I'll let you know when I have something to announce. AJ, we should note this isn't the first time that Whitmer has needed to call a special election. Before we let you go, what do we know about how long this usually takes?
So MERS, which is one of the outlets that covers statewide politics, actually did a pretty interesting study. They denoted every time Whitmer has had to call a special election and found that on average, within 17 days, she tends to call a special election. This is the longest gap between a vacancy date and a special election announcement date in Governor Whitmer's tenure. And this is kind of a sticking point for Republicans, right? Because they're saying, well, when the Democratic House majority was at risk in two fairly safe Democratic strongholds, you called the elections really quick. And you can go back to the record and point to other times when she's called elections with relative quickness. This is, like I said, the longest she's gone between calling elections.
That is AJ Jones, reporter at WCMU, who has been keeping track of all things State Senate District 35. AJ, thanks so much for the time.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, AJ.
And Rick, we should note, though, and hat tip to the Detroit News for this one, they went back to the Snyder years, and they note when then U.S. Representative John Conyers, right, so this is Congress, when he resigned from the House at the end of 2017, Governor Rick Snyder set the special election to, quote, coincide with the regularly scheduled 2018 primary and general elections, leaving the 13th congressional district covering much of Detroit without a representative for 11 months.
11 months. It's not unusual for governors to want to make these special elections coincide with regular elections. It's obviously less expensive for taxpayers. But yeah, sometimes that means a lot of people are left without representation, either in Washington or Lansing for a long time. And this time with Governor Whitmer's second-term agenda on the line, fixing the roads, etc. This seat, the calling of special elections, could be a bargaining chip.
And what could end up being a tied state Senate in that second term. And that is It's Just Politics for today. I am Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
Let's talk again next week.